Hello, good morning, good afternoon, welcome. I'm very pleased to be joined by Alicia Eastman. Alicia is the board member and co-founder of InterContinental Energy, the company that everyone I'm sure knows, and wears many other hats, including the host of the podcast, Everything About Hydrogen, and works for the Hydrogen Council on trying to implement the SDGs at an advisory level. So welcome, Alicia. Thank you for joining me.
To be here. Thank you.
As lots happened since certainly since we last personally spoke. I think it was probably over 18 months ago. Um, Maybe you want to sort of give us an update around first maybe intercontinental energy. One of the big pioneering and most aggressive, I guess, project developers really sort of leading the charge and looking at huge, big scale projects. Sorry, and really, I guess, providing that kind of vision, which sort of set the template for many others. So maybe unpick a little bit about where you are, how you see the landscape. These are obviously huge I'd call them multi-decadal, but multi-year projects. How's the landscape developing in terms of, I guess, the regulatory frameworks around the work you're doing?
Sure. Well, I think that most of the information about intercontinental energy is actually public, but it's obviously difficult to pull everything together into one story. I think that last time we spoke, we may have made a number of announcements, but there has been a lot of activity and a lot of really big wins, I think, for the company and for the industry. So I think from the company's point of view, we have announced three different projects. We announced the first one, which it was originally called the Asian Renewable Energy Hub. And then when BP decided to invest in it and to operate it, we renamed it the Australian Renewable Energy Hub, which made actually a little bit more sense, but kept the letters. And that one is intended to be 26 gigawatts of upstream wind and solar, and then it could produce 1.6 million tons per annum of green ammonia, green hydrogen, and then potentially 9.9 million tons per annum of green ammonia. And then almost a sister project we announced a little bit later in Oman. And Oman has also excellent coastal desert, sun during the day, wind at night, that perfect diurnal profile. And we went through a process with Oman because they did a formal sort of breakup of land and applications and sort of award of the land. And so we announced also a 25 gigawatt project there eventually. And that, as you know, was partnered with OIA and also with KAA. And then Shell came in as an investor and an operator. So both of those are very much on track. And a next one was announced in Australia. It is about 50 gigawatts of upstream wind and solar. And there was a MOU announced with KEPCO and a number of other activities, but it is also excellent land, and it's a partnership with the Murnine Nation, and they are traditional owners, native title holders of the land. So we really wanted to partner as opposed to I guess, negotiate. We preferred to have them sit on the board, have a lifetime board seat, have a stake in the project, and also have an agreement with them so that we don't do anything to their land that they don't approve of, and to give them that power over their land that they deserve as the traditional landowners.
Yeah.
So we've really tried to do that in the best way possible to give the most input and to make sure that that we do no harm, because we got into this business to help out the environment and and not just the environment. I think that the goals of the company are very much along ESG in general. And then we announced, of course, GIC invested in our Series A, and in last September, GIC also announced re-upping, and also High 24, or HY 24 as they call it in
Yeah.
France. High 24 is the largest now hydrogen only investor, and
Mhm.
it's an Article 9 fund, so it's an impact investor. And so that's, I think we've hit the
Yeah,
the blue chip investors, the blue chip
yeah.
partners, on the ground, as also as operators. I think we're quite confident in the ability to actually deliver. And so, yeah, I think things are moving really, really well. And that's, of course, when I get very uncomfortable.
Yeah. There's no challenges left. I mean, in terms of I mean, the numbers, you just sort of roll them off as if it's, as if you're talking megawatts, but you're not, you're talking gigawatts. I mean, then, the scale of this is worth just sort of highlighting. I mean, to 26 gigawatt, 25 gigawatts, 50 gigawatts. I mean, these numbers are absurd even if you look at, the biggest sort of fossil fuel projects. I mean, they
Yeah.
are huge, huge, gargantuan scale projects. I mean, and in terms of sort of I guess the phased building out of these projects, they I assume sort of 10-year projects minimum. I don't know how long it takes to build 50 gigawatts.
Well, I mean, the 50 gigawatts is obviously going to take a bit longer, but yes,
Yeah.
you're not going to throw down 25 gigawatts in 1 year. It's
Mm.
phased out. And the first phase is we've always said will be a little bit more expensive, obviously, than later phases. But one thing that you get with renewables based energy is this clarity on what it will cost.
Mm.
And, solar surprisingly continues to fall in price.
Yeah.
And it continues to potentially go up in terms of capacity factor. There's a
Mhm.
lot of different developments in R&D on that side.
Yeah.
And then wind, of course, anything you see offshore is going to be onshore, and it's going to cost a lot less in just 2 years. So there's a
Yeah.
step function with wind that's quite reliable. So, the first phase will have more infrastructure, and then each phase thereafter is going to go down in price. And it'll be very easy to sort of predict what your cost is. And that means that you're a much more predictable partner for energy. It's obviously we're not going to be negative. The things that happen with oil and gas are just
Yeah.
almost capricious. It's
Yeah.
the way that they pop up and down. So for a lot of industries, this will bring people a lot of comfort. It'll be a lot easier to plan around. And for some industries, obviously traders always love arbitrage, so that, maybe they won't be so happy. But I think
Mm.
for the majority, knowing that you can afford your energy is something that people will appreciate.
Yeah.
And just generally, like I think one of the reasons we can have projects this large is because because we have so much clarity from the data that we gather. It's not a situation of oil and gas. We don't have to spend $1 billion, dig a hole and find out there's nothing there. Like
Mm.
we know pretty much when we go to a site if that site is going to have the resource that we want. Then it's a question of, is there anything else we might disrupt? Is there any way that this could be negative for the environment? And those are sites that we're not interested in. So, and then once you find a site that is ticks all the boxes, why not make it as big as possible? Why, if you're going to still have all those wind speeds and you're not going to have the solar, make it as big as possible because you'll get those economies of scale. And that's really going to drive the price down.
Mm.
You're going to have that higher capacity factor, and that's going to drive the price down. And even though I can't stand the term green premium, and I think that, it is
Yeah.
a very much an oil and gas lens at looking at things. I think that they're getting a dirty discount more than we're getting the
Yes,
green
I like
premium.
that. 30 discounts,
Um,
definitely the right
but
way
but
to
I
view it.
yeah, but I still think that if we're smart, we'll do what solar has done, and we will get the price down as much as possible because
Mm.
that's when people really make change and they really move, and it just eases everything. So
Yeah.
so I would like, regulatory and policy to recognize that they need to subsidize these activities, and they need to encourage and at least stop subsidizing fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And but also from our point of view as the operator or as the producer of the green fuels, it's in our best interest, in the market's best interest, to just get the price down as
Yeah.
fast as we can.
And in
um
when you look at some of the, the historical LCOEs, the levelized cost of electricity charts, and obviously the nuclear, you see it going up, and what I call a folk loop, so first of its kind, and they keep repeating the same mistake. Whereas and some people have suggested hydrogen can follow that path, and there aren't that many economies of scale or economies of numbers to sort of squeeze out the value chain or the things. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, the electrolyzers, they seem to be there's a whole I guess Cambrian explosion of innovation happening there, and with your scale of your projects, you'll be probably using some newer technologies further down the line. But certainly, all of that technology piece seems to follow the same sort of scale, modularity, and learning rates that we had seen with wind and solar, which were all kind of well, lots of incremental gains.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at the cost of producing hydrogen, the absolute most expensive element is the energy. And so you really need to look at, what your resource is. And it's very important that you have, something, if it's hydro, fine, I mean, that's not technically renewable, but hydro is reliable. And what you're really trying to get is something close to dispatchable energy, right? In order for the costs of production downstream to be cheaper, you need to have these plants running full time, and you just can't afford to have this sort of 25% of the time you have energy and then nothing. So it is really important that you have this capacity factor. So it's not just the economies of scale, but it's also the price and the availability, the dispatchability. So
the location, which is your point around diurnal coastal deserts being perfect for windy nights and sunny days.
Which was Alex, my co-founder's original sort of, eureka moment, was that like these are the places. This is where this is the best place to do this. And I think that does make a huge impact. Now, a lot of people are thinking, that they're going to be taking from the grid, from a grid that is partially green. There's just a lot of different equations that go into the production costs and whatnot that are just not relevant to projects like ours, because we are really going green upstream all the way down, and all the green electrons are used in order to make the green molecules. And so, we service ourselves.
Where you're going and you're building these huge projects, there is no grid, and you're looking at and tapping renewable resources which haven't been used to date because they're not very close to population densities. They're really just great renewable resources which we were never able to tap. Now we can tap them and bottle them into green molecules and ship the molecules. So it's really, if we were really serious, I guess one would advocate, putting green hydrogen projects on Antarctica, where you've probably got the best wind in the world. But obviously, I'm not advocating that. But it's a way of viewing the world where you're seeing all these great renewable resources that we can now tap without having to connect huge, expensive copper cables to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you'll probably see some activity in Mongolia and some other places that have sort of these big desert winds and whatnot. But I think that populations are not too far away. So again, if you look at Oman, they have something like a 30% unemployment rate, and a lot of educated engineers, and it's not like there isn't a really good employment base. It's just there are not a lot of jobs. So this is something that's really great. This is the in-country value that countries want. And also, there's lots of things we can do. I think, any project like ours they can desalinate the water, they can provide more potable water to the area for consumers and for industry, but they can also mine the brine, and you can get lithium from that, so you can help in another green sector. There's just lots of things. You can green the desert. You can be growing crops underneath the PV with
Yeah.
the shade of the PV. And so a lot of these countries are very much worried about food security and being able to have food security, having water. I mean, it's just a lot that you could do to make this a livable area and somewhere where people are quite happy to build out. And the fact is it's not extractive, right? So it lasts forever. So you can really commit to this area. You can gradually build, something that is a real city, is a real place to be, to live. It is not just a temporary sort of
Yeah.
stand-up mine. So I
Yeah.
think you don't have a lot of the same problems that you would have sort of on an ESG side with mining.
Yeah.
Um, you know. Of
Yeah.
course, there is mining that has to occur at some point for a number of your supply chain elements.
Yeah.
But
The metals in the electrolysis, but
yeah,
yeah, I understand. And as you say, yeah, particularly the desalination, you over provision that, and where there is water and where there is energy, there is life and creating ecosystems
yeah,
of agriculture and greater resilience and reducing food miles. I mean, there's a whole plethora. I mean, you picked up on the point earlier. You mentioned the participation of was it the Mani Nation, which was yeah, interesting. I think probably particularly in the having recently seen as most people have probably seen the film Killers of the Flower Moon and seeing what happened in the history of the oil and gas industry, perhaps. But just yeah, to expand upon that point, given the scale of the projects that you're working on, clearly not binding in, but having honest, true equity partners in the local landowners must be a massive positive. And is that, I assume, recognized in terms of um, taking more risk out of the project from a financial standpoint?
I think absolutely that is what it achieves. Whether it's recognized as that, I'm not sure.
Mm,
It constantly surprises me that people choose to have such, I guess, acrimonious relationships with their stakeholders. It has been my experience that the easiest way to get something going that has a lot of stakeholders, that has neighbors, is to talk to the neighbors, to empathize with them, to sit in their shoes, and to think what would make this attractive for them.
yeah.
What would make this, how do I turn this into a win for them? And then you don't have to run into the NIMBYism. You get the YIMBYism. You get people who actually want you to be there. And I really think that's the best way to make deals. And there are people that want to take the last penny off the table, and they really want to feel like it's not a deal unless they screwed the other party. But from I think it's a long life. Your reputation is really most of what you've got, and I think that you're better off, walking away with both parties happy, to come back for further deals. And that's just like I try to explain that in a way that is, cold and hard because apparently just being nice is not appreciated. So, you can look at it
Yeah.
from either way. Either you like
Yeah.
to look yourself in the mirror and you're happy with what you see. That's one rationale, and that I think drives me. But if you want to look at it just from a purely, just a financial perspective or from just cold hard facts, you're going to do better if
Yeah.
you with people instead of work against them. And I just don't see why you would invite strife to your life for no reason.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, obviously there is a cost, but that cost is clearly outweighed, as you've said. Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of, I guess, broadening out from the specific work of the ICE, and just looking beyond across the industry in terms of the challenges, what are some of the sort of key challenges? I guess from the production side, we seem to be getting a lot of things right. There's some maybe challenges now on shearing up the demand side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we're still really lagging behind on the regulations and sort of the demand drivers from a regulatory perspective. So, people are just figuring it out. A lot of countries are just figuring out their hydrogen strategies. Um, we have, I mean, there are a number of sectors where we have an advantage, like in shipping, for instance, you've got one regulator for the entire world. You have
Yeah.
the International Maritime Organization, and you've got a new Secretary General that is really dedicated to the environment. So that is just fantastic because you have 8 years of somebody who's proven his ability to get people to agree together on paths forward and really has like they have agreed to a really high standard,
Mm.
essentially a net zero in 2050, and before that it was 2100.
Yeah.
So quite a lot that was
Yeah.
accomplished in the last meeting. So in that situation, they're working on exactly how they're going to do it. But they really are taking it on, and it is going to be coming out quickly. So they've already announced that there will be some kind of financial mechanism, some kind of, I don't want to give it a name that people dislike, but something if for pollution that will be announced in 2025 and then will take effect in 2027, which is quite soon.
Mhm.
That's just really around the corner. So I think they're really acting quickly. And then,
And so
there's
they is the IMO or
the IMO.
Imarist, which is their sort of technical, and they, they have history in the game in terms of setting up the low sulfur zones, I think, and you can see what will occur, and I guess the interesting thing will be the shipping industry's response, given that there's quite sort of, I guess, a wide range of different shipping companies. Um,
Yeah, well, and actually, it really comes down to the member states. So, the member states each have one vote. It's not like the
mm,
US has 50 votes and,
yeah,
Ecuador gets one. No, everyone has one vote.
yeah,
And most of the member states are global South countries. So, we really need to find a way to, and this is something we, of course, that everyone wants to do anyway, is to make this a truly just transition. You really have to find a way for global South countries to participate in the hydrogen economy. And that also is a way that they will see these rules coming out of the IMO as being beneficial to their countries because it's essentially a demand for a fuel that they can make,
yeah,
and that they can sell. And you do need the fuels everywhere in the world for shipping, right? It's not like you can just make them all in one place. It needs to be everywhere. And until they're everywhere, you're going to have to use some kind of book and claim system so that you can take credit for it if you've as a company, if you decided you want to use all green fuels and they're just not available on every sector of your movement. But so I think one of the things is really making sure that shipping is part of the hydrogen strategies for these countries, and seeing the way that they can participate. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just the countries that have the resources that can produce the fuels. They can be, if you look at Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, these are not necessarily places where hydrogen will be produced the most cheaply because it's very squally skies and it's
yeah,
not strong of a resource. But it's a great place to make electrolyzers, to make PV, to really diversify the supply chain for these really important materials. And I think there's a story like that for nearly every country you can think of. There's a way for them to jump on this, and it's such a, because it's kind of an infrastructure element, right? It's energy. A lot of people will be leapfrogging. They never even had the fossil fuels infrastructure. So that's a help to them. And it also just helps to lay this undergirding for more complex economies so that they can start to attract other industries that want inexpensive green energy or whatever it is that they have that they can offer. And I think that can be just great, all around for most countries in the world. I mean, I don't see any big losers here,
yeah,
especially since we really do need to do something about the global about climate change,
yeah,
which is definitely producing a lot of losers.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean the I guess the lucky countries in the fossil fuel world were those that sat on ancient seas, whereas the spread of renewable resources, you've got solar clearly going around the equator, but then you've got strong wind on the Capricorns. or and cancer.
I've pulled
Um,
my globe out for that.
yeah, yeah, I always get them confused. Um, and yeah, I mean, you mentioned shipping, which yeah, is worth pointing out. The 2050 date is incredible. And we've seen obviously also some dates come in from compliance from the aviation side with
Yeah.
the equal component. I think for 2030, again, we're seeing a huge peak in interest in SAF and SAF from a non-biological interest, which obviously yeah,
Like
pretty,
e-kerosene essentially. If
yeah.
you're going to use, yeah. So there's definitely a market. I mean, that's really the only market for aviation, a long distance aviation, until they can build a different aircraft. And obviously that's 20, I mean, that's 20 years.
Yeah,
Shipping is a little easier. The vessels can be built in 1.5 to 2 years. You can make a dramatic changes. You can change the fuel. The engine is already, essentially finished. It's coming from MAN and from others. And I think there's it's just easier to get going faster with shipping.
yeah,
But the e-kerosene market, which is the SAF market, is able to grow right now with aviation. So I do think you're going to get some competition between methanol, which uses the same biogenic CO2 as e-kerosene, and aviation, it has to win. I mean,
yeah,
because it's their only option. So
yeah,
yeah, so that's going to be interesting
yeah,
to see play out.
yeah, definitely. I think how that plays out will indeed be interesting. You would expect aviation to be able to pass on a higher premium, I would imagine. Um, in terms of other areas of sort of demand, obviously we're seeing good movement on the steel side with DRI. Green fertilizers is always should be one of the starting points in terms of the existing uses of hydrogen and decarbonizing that. And indeed, seeing that as an opportunity for countries that currently are importing fertilizers and begin to now look at, maybe capturing some of that value chain and producing their own fertilizers. And indeed, there are many countries which currently don't have enough fertilizers because of costs. So we can also begin to look at a great story around helping build resiliency in the agricultural system. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, Olivier at Tome has the Paraguay project. I don't know if you've looked at that, but they were importing fertilizer and now they're making green fertilizer for their own use and exporting, for sale. So that's an ideal project, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's fantastic. I think that there are a lot of um, there are some improvements in fertilizers that are necessary. And the use of fertilizer needs to change a bit because people have been overusing it forever. I mean, I remember doing a pro bono project in China, and it was basically in the South China Sea and in other areas, like basically the pollution was all non-point agricultural runoff, and people were using 10 times the amount of ammonia necessary.
mm,
And that happens a lot because they can increase the yield for a year, like 2 to 3%, and they feel that they need to do that, but then there's no topsoil left.
mm,
And the whole world is having a problem with topsoil, which is
yeah,
why there's been this return to sort of regenerative farming and all the different old types of farming and letting land lay fallow and planting in certain ways and a lot of different changes in that space. Which is not to say that I think that we're not going to use ammonia for fertilizer, but I think that might just be a flatter trajectory given the population is increasing versus other sectors, which are going to continue growing up. And we need to use some of these new innovations in fertilizers. We need to use less ammonia.
yeah,
And actually, one thing you can do, which even our projects could do, is take the leftover oxygen from splitting the water. And if you use the oxygen, you can speed up the process of metabolizing like compost or other sort of fertilizer type things to create topsoil. So you can do
Hmm.
that faster, and then that means that when it does finally rain, it doesn't just slide off because it's just so dry that there's nothing to catch it. And you create an place to actually farm.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that can be done. I think there's a that's an area that it's not as easy as saying, oh, let's just replace it. That's so obvious, because actually that's an area that needs some work. It's an
Hmm.
area that needs some looking at how we do it now and if that is really going to last,
Yeah.
because it does need some looking at. But there are chemicals, there are all sorts of things that currently gray hydrogen is used for that green should be used for. So the current markets are obviously possible target markets. And then some of the other ones, as you mentioned, steel. Steel could potentially even be a market for ammonia rather than hydrogen. They're now looking at whether you could retrofit and use ammonia and whether that would actually be a net save from an environmental point of view. So that's new.
Yeah.
Um, and then co-firing, obviously, and also just using for power plants. That idea has grown dramatically since we started looking at different markets.
Yeah.
Um, so there's yeah, I think there's quite a number of markets, which is good, and but it also is for some industries kind of scary because they don't have a lot of options, and they obviously don't want to pay 10 times more. So the key again is just getting this price down and getting the materials produced worldwide in as great a quantities as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there anything that keeps you up at night, in terms of worries or concerns, or you're fairly, optimistic as you've just been saying, and it's a question of sort of now driving forward and learning through doing and getting these first wave of projects deployed, or certainly the first stages of some of these projects crossing FID, and then obviously you start getting steel in the ground.
Um, I wouldn't say that it keeps me up at night. I mean, I think that the capital markets are not really friendly right now.
Hmm.
It has not been an easy time for a lot of people, and a lot of good companies are really struggling to get anything even close to fair kind of financing. There's also still, they really still haven't figured out how to finance this sort of development desert that everyone talks about, but I don't see the money going there. It's still very, very difficult to move from that sort of Series A, or that, from the seed stage and to where you start spending a little bit more money. And then at FID, of course, everybody's happy to do that because it's all been de-risked and it's all just everything lines up. It's all fine. It's that in between that needs the financing and the support. And I am seeing I'm seeing a lot of good signs on this. I'm seeing a lot of banks like Banco Santander. All of the French banks are always very good at project finance, and they are hiring technical people, and they're doing a lot so that they can invest earlier and they can get involved earlier and they can set the projects up for success for financing. And I think that also the ECAs, they've announced recently an organization, which I can't remember the name of. It's a lot
Yeah.
of letters.
Yeah. I
I have
can't remember
I have
either.
nightmares about letters just from our projects alone. But this is, the Danish ECA is very IFO is very I guess ahead of the space and a number of others. So it's like 5 or 6 ECAs and then some other partners to create sort of these more creative tools, different financing mechanisms, ways to help. And the thing with ECAs, um, there's always this sort of gray space between these OECD countries helping out their companies. Is this fair trade or is it not?
Yeah.
But because this is something that's for the whole world, kind of gets a free pass. And so it means that there's just a lot more ways that they can be helpful.
Hmm.
And that's great. And it's not just in developing countries. So, ECAs can be supportive anywhere in the world. And I think just a lot of people just don't know that. They don't know
Yeah.
that that's available. So I think getting the word out about that and really coming up with some creative tools. They already do have a lot of creative tools. I think that is going to help a lot. And it's especially going to be if you compare, I don't know if you noticed, but Swiss Re has just said they will not do any reinsurance for oil and gas.
Ah,
And a number of other reinsurance companies have dropped out of the market entirely. And oil and gas normally does its own insurance and then they get reinsurance. So if they're
mm,
not able to get reinsurance, that is going to be very difficult financing for them. It's going to
yeah,
cost more. That's what they care about.
yeah,
And if you compare that to another industry where you're actively getting support with insurance that is, below market pricing and is offering to cover off these areas that, could potentially be they could potentially be sources of risk. It starts to look, we're starting to get, it looks a lot better. It looks like
yeah,
something that is actually easier and less risky to invest in. And as I said before, it is in a lot of ways less risky because, the renewables don't surprise so much.
yeah.
You're not going to look at the satellite map and think it's windy somewhere and get there and be like, well, it's just here.
Yeah.
You know?
What happened to the wind? Yeah. Excellent. So yeah, I think it's been fascinating to talk to you, Alicia. It was great to share your experience, which is second to none. Congratulations on all the work that ICE has done and your role in driving it. And enjoy maybe the back seat now in terms of the board membership. And we look forward to seeing what you do next to keep your lively mind occupied. So many
Yes,
thanks, Alicia. Take care, and look forward to speaking to you or meeting you soon.
definitely. Take care too.
Cheers. Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.